No, really.
Our dream is to bring the biblical underpinning to principles of governance. Everybody understands the Bible speaks to personal issues, speaks to family issues, speaks to how church life should function. But oftentimes we forget that God is the one who originated government, and he speaks to the issue of government as well.
Garlow has a bit of a head start.
Over the last, and particularly 4 years, our church launched a ministry in Washington, D.C., and then last year we started a Bible study in the United Nations.
And a third ministry in the Israeli Knesset, of all places.
Biblical principles are the key to understanding how government is supposed to function. If we follow what the Scripture has to say, we could reduce human suffering and a great deal of human pain and human poverty.
The ministries in the capital and the UN are evangelistic as well. The one in Jerusalem is led by a rabbi and will focus on governance. Garlow says, if you think about it, could you please lift him up in prayer?
So just pray for God's wisdom, God's blessing, God's protection, God's provision over us as we go into this arena.
I'm Steve Jordahl.
And remember, you can access American Family News 24 hours a day, 7 days a week when you log on to the World Wide Web at onenewsnow.com. And that is American Family News on the Hour. I'm Chad Groening.
Y'all have encouraged us to go out, stand for the Word of God, stand politically.
It's truly a blessing to hear how God is using Urban Family Talk.
Just want to say I love everything that Urban Family does.
Will you take a moment to share your story? Call 877-327-5647. That's 877-327-5647. Thanks.
She's sharp, pointed, and insightful. This is Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
While people might have had issues with the term socialist, a lot of people, when they looked at the actual things that they believed in, health care for all, free college tuition, actual equality, shrinking the gap between poor people and rich people in this country, they thought that they agreed with that.
There's a lot of different material to cover here with a judge who has been a partisan, engaged in both the Bush White House and the Ken Starr, the Judge Starr investigation of the Clinton White House, and given his 300 opinions on the D.C. Circuit.
We want full disclosure. We want a lot of information that's now classified to be disclosed, but there are proper ways of disclosing this. And you know who's at fault for this more than anyone else? Comey, because he leaked information and laundered it through a professor at Columbia Law School. Shame on that professor, and shame on Comey.
And now, Stacy Washington.
Welcome to the program. We are live and having a great day here in the Heartland, broadcasting from outside of St. Louis on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk. It's great to be with you today. Hope you were able to catch my hit on Fox Business this morning. On today's program, we have a stellar lineup for you. We're going to be speaking with Carmine Sabia. He is going to come on. He's a conservative political pundit, radio host, and editor. He's going to join us, talk about current events, namely all of this leak. We got a lot of leaking going on. We have evidence of a lot of leaking that's gone on, so we're going to talk about that. We will also discuss the media leak strategy under Director Comey. Now that we know more about it, it's time to kind of unpack it. We've got some audio from Tom Fitton on the new Strzok text. This is very, very informative. He's the head of Judicial Watch. They do all of the Freedom of Information requests. So we'll be listening to a little bit of that and unpacking that. We'll be taking your calls at 866-963-2037. We are also going to be talking about Google's fight in Europe against laws that they have that basically protect the citizen's right to be forgotten. In other words, you have something bad happen, you maybe make a political comment, and it's years past, but people can still search it on the internet and use it to destroy you. And so in Europe, they allow their citizens to basically file a complaint with an online search agency, and that online search engine will remove the offending content. In other words, to give a person a fresh start. Now, there are some concerns about free speech and First Amendment and the right for people to have free and unfettered access to information. And in Europe, they tend to feel like that is subjugated to a person's right to kind of have something be in their past and let it go, to change, to become another person. So Google is actually fighting with the European governments and the people who kind of regulate the internet over there about this. So we're going to talk about that as well. Also, we'll be asking again for listeners to call in and leave a voicemail with your name and your state and city that you're calling from, and talk about how Urban Family Talk has impacted you, how this show has maybe impacted you. We'd be so grateful if you do that. The number is 877-327-5647. So right now I want to jump in. We have this really interesting thing that's happened, and that is, in lieu of discussing continuously, this whole idea that the president somehow as a candidate colluded with the Russians, or just it's the most outlandish thing ever, and I can't believe we've been discussing it for this long, but we have, and we've been spending tens of millions of dollars on investigating it, and that's still going on. And so you've got Alan Dershowitz, and he kind of takes us through this timeline where he talks about the leaks and the laundered info and all of that, but then he goes a step further to kind of push for it's the same thing we've been saying here on this program, which is, where's the equanimity here? Where's the idea that as American taxpayers, we recognize that people are innocent until proven guilty, but we're only prosecuting one side of this entire story. The other side is literally getting away with breaking almost every rule there is. So here he is. He's talking about how Comey leaked, Comey laundered. He did all of that to get this investigation going. It's number 6.
J. Edgar Hoover, who notoriously lived by leaks, he would threaten political enemies that he would leak information about their sex lives and about their private life. And it was wrong. It was wrong then. It's wrong now. And when an FBI agent or a prosecutor leaks grand jury material, it's criminal. What we need now is an objective investigation by the Inspector General, by the Office of Professional Responsibility, into these leaks and into what was meant by the email that said that we have a leak strategy. It's hard to believe that that meant that we have a strategy to stop leaks. It seems much more plausible that he was talking about a strategy designed to leak things selectively to the media in order to achieve the goal he had set out for himself, namely to have an insurance policy against electing a man who he thought was dangerous to the country.
So is that not worthy of investigation? I guess one of the questions that I have, that I would love to see Congress, one of these fantastic panels, maybe a Senate panel, convene and pull Mueller in and kind of hold him accountable. This morning on Fox, the opposing view person that I was on with was talking about how this it's well, as a veteran, I said as a veteran, I think we should have the rule of law. And he said he's a veteran too. And Mueller is a veteran and he's above reproach. Well, I think we've gotten to a place now in America where I think it's fantastic when we're veterans. I'm a veteran. He was a veteran. Mueller's a veteran. I think veterans deserve respect, obviously, as do all people. But being a veteran doesn't mean you're above reproach. Serving honorably in the military doesn't automatically catapult you to being he's above reproach. He is a person of impeccable integrity. Until otherwise, of course he is. Until we find out news to the contrary, of course he's a person of great integrity. But here's the question. Is a person of great integrity, just because they're a veteran, that means they can no longer be questioned on their actions? A person can never be asked, why do you still have this person on your team? I mean, person by person, these people are dropping like dominoes. They start off, they're on the Mueller team and they're investigating. Then we find out, they were engaged in some of the text messaging, or they're connected to Bruce and Nellie Orr, or they have all of these different, it's like these spaghetti strings of connections. And every time we pull up another lid on the pots, we see more connections, spaghetti type strings between all of the same bad actors. And now the strings are starting to lead back to the Mueller team. And so the question for Americans is, because you have to look at this from the perspective of, if it can happen to Donald Trump, if it can happen to Michael Flynn and these other names that we've heard, they're getting convictions now, little jail time for Papadopoulos, little bit of conviction for Manafort. it may be all well and good to sit up and look at it and say, well, look, he's got this, yeah. But what about when it's your turn? We all know that can happen. We all know that it can be that you start off and you don't think you're doing anything wrong. And it's been like a joke. It's been repeated so often. It's become like a maxim that every American in the country is guilty of, 3 felonies because of the myriad of laws that we have that contradict each other, that some of them are out of date and don't have any meaning, yet there they are. I don't know if every American would be guilty of 3 felonies, but it remains to be seen how many more people they can just drag in and toss indictments onto for stuff that they've done, decades ago. And I'm not making it okay to evade taxes or embezzle money or, whatever the different things, wire fraud, all that. That's all wrong. It should be prosecuted. But it shouldn't be done as a means to an end for attacking political opponents. There are laws against that too. That's actually illegal. So as he goes on here, he's talking, Alan Dershowitz is, he's talking a little bit more about, this, all of it, the ideas behind it, all of it, what it has to do with, which is that there was a certain thing that they wanted. And when I say they, I mean people who were Hillary supporters. And they used the government to get it. That should send a chill down everyone's spine. The fact that they got what they wanted and now they're dragging it out with the help of Bob Mueller, veteran, honorable, service, HUA, awesome. The fact that they're using him as a tool to drag this out so they can impact the midterm elections without the help of the Russians, so I guess that makes it okay, should be alarming to all of us. Here's Dershowitz kind of wrapping this thing up as number 7.
He has a right to his opinion. He had a right to vote any way he wanted. He doesn't have a right to try to influence the outcome of an election through leaks. Now, I'm taken by the point that he may not have leaked before the election. We have to look into that. We have to find out about that, and that's what the Inspector General is about. Now, your previous guest mentioned the investigation by Congress, but as far as I know, at least I didn't know about this email during that investigation. He wasn't asked about it. If that email exists and is authentic, it should have been in the hands of the people who are asking him the questions. He may have to be called back now to answer questions about what he meant under oath, what he meant by saying we have a leak strategy. I doubt that he will say under oath, oh, it was intended to make sure there were no leaks. That just doesn't pass the giggle test.
So very quickly, why are more people not outraged by this? Does anyone want to live in a country where a law enforcement agency... I know, but this isn't a side. This is the side of every American who's subject to the FBI or any law enforcement agency. I mean, this should be scary to Democrats as well as Republicans.
It is so dangerous to every American. Today it's Trump, thereafter. Tomorrow it could be Bernie Sanders or Hillary Clinton, and the day after tomorrow it could be you and me. That's why every civil libertarian, Democrat and Republican, has to be concerned about government by leak. Look, we want full disclosure. We want a lot of information that's now classified to be disclosed. But there are proper ways of disclosing this. And you know who's at fault for this more than anyone else? Comey. Because he leaked information and laundered it through a professor at Columbia Law School. Shame on that professor and shame on Comey. If Comey didn't have the courage to stand up in front of a TV camera and say, look, I feel so strongly about this that I'm going to give you this information. But no, he snuck the information to a law professor who collaborated with him in getting the information and causing the appointment of a special counsel without having the courage of his conviction to stand up. That's what a civil libertarian would do. That's what a patriotic American would do.
And that's the truth. So this, honestly, it's patriotic, sure, to be an upstanding citizen and to do the right thing. But does it have to be about patriotism, or should it just be about doing what's right? I'm a huge patriot. I'm a flag waver. Check it out right there. We have flags stationed around our house on the outside. We fly the flag. We definitely believe in this country. We believe in the concept of representative government. Patriotism, I got it in spades. But this isn't about patriotism. I take it a step further than Mr. Dershowitz, and it's about what's right and what's wrong. And if you've gotten to a place where you're so partisan that you can't see that even when it's your opponent, when it's your enemy, that you still have to do the right thing. I mean, where are we really? Where are we really in America when we have tens of millions of people openly advocating for the persecution of a group of individuals so that they can see their removal from office just because they're from the opposing political party? You know, back when Barack Obama was first elected, and then you have the progression of his presidency, and then Benghazi happened. And there was talk online. I remember reading so many blogs of people who were like, this is it. They're going to impeach him, you know, because this was clearly a stand down order was given. Americans lost their lives. This didn't have to happen. We had, you know, gunships within 11 minutes of the location. I remember listening to people who were on, you know, they'd previously been on active duty recently, talking about how quickly they could scramble, not just F-16s and F-15s and F-22s, but they could scramble a gunship to that location in 11 minutes, and they were told not to. And I remember listening to it and remembering doing reporting on just that type of thing. That was my job in the Air Force. I used to go to the flight line. My office was on the flight line. I used to go down to the hangar where the aircraft would be. And if there was a hard break on something like an O-ring, I'd go down there, and it was almost like an interview. I'd ask the crew chief, why does this keep breaking? What's going on here? And then I'd have to create reports on that, the special breaks, the hard breaks. And then I'd have to create a whole report on how many aircraft were ready in the fleet for the squadron that I was assigned to. How fast can we scramble this many jets to this location or anywhere in the contiguous United States, anywhere, blah, blah, blah. So I know what they're talking about here, but we never went for that. The Republicans never tried to impeach Obama. There's some honor in that. I can see that now. We'll be right back.
Hello, everyone. I'm Tim Wildman, president of American Family Association and American Family Radio. You know, the very first day in Israel, when we're staying in Jerusalem, we go to the Mount of Olives. And it's there at the Mount of Olives we look out over the old city of Jerusalem. It's a spectacular sight. You've seen it in pictures before, but it's another thing to actually be there as we walk down from the Mount of Olives to the Garden of Gethsemane, and we pray there. It's going to be a wonderful time with brothers and sisters from around the country visiting the Holy Land, the land of Jesus. If you want information on this March 14th through the 22nd tour, just call us and we'll send you a brochure. Call 1-800-FAMILIES, F-A-M-I-L-I-E-S, option 5, and leave us your name and your address, and we'll mail you a brochure. Or if you want to simply go online at twholyland.com, everything's there. twholyland.com.
Hi, I'm Crawford Loritz with A Legacy Moment. Our 4 children are grown, and this is a very exciting time in our lives. We love hanging out with each other, and it's great to see how they've continued to mature. Because they're not children anymore, we need to relate to them differently. We can't treat them like we used to. Go here, come here, don't do that. They're adults. They're fully responsible for their choices and decisions, just like we are. Although we're still mom and dad, we're more like peers. It's really wonderful. People grow, and we need to treat them based on where they are, not where they were. To disciple or mentor someone doesn't mean you keep him or her in a dependent relationship. Paul wrote Philemon to tell him about the growth of his former slave Onesimus. Listen to these words in verses 15 through 17 of Philemon. For perhaps he was for this reason parted from you for a while, that you should have him back forever, no longer as a slave, but more than a slave, a beloved brother, especially to me, but how much more to you, both in the flesh and in the Lord. If then you regard me a partner, accept him as you would me. In other words, Paul says, Philemon, listen, friend, some things have changed. Onesimus has grown and developed. He knows Jesus now. Don't treat him the way you used to treat him. No, buddy, I want to tell you, this is Paul speaking. This guy is a partner with me, and he's going to be a partner with you. You've got to adjust how you relate to him. Here's what I want you to remember today. Everything changes in life, including people. Let's ask God to give us the capacity to relinquish control and to love and embrace people based on where God has them. Because people grow.
More information about the ministry of Crawford Loritz can be found online at livingalegacy.org.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Welcome back to the program. Thank you so much for being here today. Find out more about the program at afr.net or urbanfamilytalk.com/Stacy. Thanks for being with us this morning. Or afternoon, actually. I had such a busy day today. Like it's just been a whirlwind, and I have so much more to do. And if you're in St. Louis and you're going to be at the big event tomorrow, I'm emceeing for the Ladies of the Hidden Heart Ministry. Hidden Heart, it's Cry of the Hidden Heart. It's a Bible study that has kind of become a really huge deal in saving marriages and really improving relations between husbands and wives. They're having a big Joy in the Morning celebration tomorrow, and I'm emceeing it right here in St. Louis. And then I'll be live on the air as usual in the afternoon, so nothing to miss. So if I'm going to get to meet you and shake your hand tomorrow, I'm looking forward to that. Right now, it's my pleasure to welcome. He's been on the program before, and we've always enjoyed our chats. It's Carmine Sabia. He is just a fantastic commentator and conservative political pundit, radio host, editor, all the good stuff. Carmine, thanks for joining us.
That's a better intro than I deserve, Stacey. How are you?
I think it's pretty good. I think that works. I think that's a good one. So I wanted to talk to you about leak. It's Leaksville in our government agencies, and the leaks are geared towards specific political goals. And I'm kind of surprised, Carmine, that more Americans, especially on the left, aren't saying to themselves, well, as much as maybe the person might not like Donald Trump, I wouldn't want to see this strategy deployed against a Democrat in office, so it's wrong.
Well, Stacey, I was going to start the show today by telling you that I had some information about you that I heard from somebody who I can't mention, but it's really bad, and we're going to have to take your show off the air, but I can't tell you why, because I can't tell you what the evidence is or who I heard it from.
Yeah, and you know what I would do? I'd be like, well, good luck with that, because I think the people at American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk would be like, until you're willing to show us evidence that we can be public with, we don't want to hear any part of that, because I would feel that way with anybody.
But yeah. Apparently Senator Feinstein doesn't think anybody's going to ask, so I don't know.
And we're seeing them deploy the same strategy against Justice Kavanaugh. I'm sorry, he's a judge. He's not a justice yet. Judge Kavanaugh.
Well, that's
Kamala.
What I'm talking about. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Her little statement today.
Yeah.
Well, I have some information, but I can't tell you who gave it to me, and I can't tell you what it is. But you shouldn't approve them because of this information I have.
So is it right? I thought I heard this morning briefly as I was running around like a chicken with my head cut off that they're delaying the vote, and this is just a strategy for them to send more coat hangers to the two female senators on the right. I mean, there's nothing there.
Are they actually delaying the vote? I didn't hear that.
Okay, good. Because I thought I heard that on the radio this morning. I'm like, I got to check that out. So that's not true.
I would think Senator McConnell would have to be a moron to delay the vote for this.
I think he would too.
But what you talked about with the leaks, I was talking to my brother about this. He asks me all the time. He's like, aren't there like regular people, Democrats out there that look at this stuff and go, what the hell? And my answer to that is no, because their number one enemy is President Trump, and they don't care what it is. They want to undo this election. And it comes down to this. And this sums it up. This sums it up with Robert Mueller. It sums it up with the FBI and the CIA and everybody else. The deep state has existed for a long time. If you look back, President Trump's not the first person to mention the deep state. It's been mentioned a lot. The deep state exists. And the deep state feels like this. You guys, we let you vote, but we don't give you much choice. And this time you really screwed us because you elected a guy we never thought you'd elect. And now we know better than you. So we have to undo what you screwed up because you don't really have the right to vote. You're supposed to just pick between two deep state members.
Yeah, but here's the problem. Even with all of that, even with everything that we've seen, let's say we can't get our friends on the left-hand side of the aisle to agree that wrong is wrong and right is right. we should be able to get people who work in the FBI and the DOJ to agree to it because their credibility is on the line. Their ability to prosecute cases in the future is on the line. If Americans don't trust that their government can be impartial and adjudicate the law constitutionally, then we have a crisis. This is a bigger problem than just Mueller. If you take the players out of it, you still are left with this horrible detritus of a society that is literally, the schism goes right down the middle. You got, roughly 30% of the country who are hard on the left. You have maybe 35 to 40% of the country who are hard on the right, but only 30% are willing to claim it. And then you have this huge swath of people in the middle who are constantly being pulled by their emotions instead of people just saying, look, I really honestly don't care about my feelings for Trump, Mueller, Manafort, Papadopoulos. What I care about is that this is never me. This can't be me. This can't be that the lady who wears the house suits all the time in my neighborhood gets to, destroy emails and do whatever she wants, vandalize property and flout it, and then keep walking around in her house dresses while I get prosecuted for the tiniest little thing. But that's what's happened.
Correct.
What do we do?
But I think you're just, people lead with their emotions, though. I mean, it's trying to talk logic to people or rational to people or common sense to people. I've been trying it for years. It seems to be a fool's effort. There's not much you can do. I try it all the time. And the scary part is if this is allowed to continue, just like you're saying, with the leaks and all this stuff, and people celebrating these leaks, it's like they're standing on the train tracks and they don't hear the train whistle coming. This is going to happen to them. It's going to happen. And leaks like this, they damage our national security. They damage the ability to keep this country safe. But trying to explain that to people who are so wrapped up in their emotions, it's very easy to appeal to people's emotions. As conservatives, we tend to think rationally before we think emotionally. Independents are the worst, really. They're the worst because they're so easily swayed back and forth that it's hard to get them to. Everybody thinks that independents are sitting there analyzing the facts and figures and trying to figure out how they're going to vote. No, they're just like everybody else. And the reason they're independent is because they're swayed by personalities and emotions. That's why they're independent. They have no hardcore beliefs that ground them. Like whether you're on the left or the right, we have hardcore beliefs that ground us to our principles. They don't really have any defining principles. So they're very easily swayed by emotions, more so than anybody else, actually.
I think it's interesting that you say that because I have found that, so some of the most fun people to talk to about politics are people who call themselves independent. And what I find for the most part is that independents are kind of on the left a little bit. But then if you explain things to them, like if you can get into a really nice back and forth, then they'll usually agree, oh, wow, I hadn't considered it that way, because they're not consuming, truth news, what I like to call it, news that's just comprised basically of the truth, impartially reported, which you normally only find on the right. And when they're presented with just a few facts, they'll say, oh, well, where can I find that? And if you can show them where you found the information and what you know, they usually will say, oh, wow, yeah, I'm interested in that, which is why the media on the left, the left and their apparatus in the media works so hard to keep people in their emotions, because clear-thinking individuals who've heard the truth, they're not going to put up with this garbage.
And I agree with what you're saying, but the thing is that, yes, you can. I've had these conversations on Twitter all the time. Mostly, you can have these conversations with independents. You can get them to your side, but an hour later they can hear something on CNN, and that will change their mind. They lead with whoever the last person they heard from, essentially. The last person they talk to is what they believe. In a lot of cases, I'm not trying to disparage all independents and say it's very easy to manipulate them, but, I mean, one of the bigger things, Stacey, is that we don't have the entertainment that they have. And the entertainment industry very easily sways people. That's why Kanye is so dangerous to the left, because the entertainment industry easily sways people. And so that's and CNN is a propaganda organization that sways people, and people think that they're reporting fair news. So the thing about independence, like I said, is the last person they talk to is who they believe.
So how do we get more? So there's this interesting phenomenon in that Kanye has never been, like, it's not like Kanye's been to conservative boot camp where he's been caught listening to, you know, some of the big radio stars that we have. You know what I mean? It's like, it's weird because you would think that one of those things would have had to have happened, but he's really one of the classic, you would expect him to be a hardcore leftist because he lives a life that, you know, once you get so far away from normal people, and, you know, he worked hard for the money, he earned it. I'm not begrudging him any of it. But once you get that far away from people who pump their own gas, only own 1 or 2 cars, you know, live in a normal neighborhood, have to interact with people, have a boss that they can't just basically say, I don't want to work for you anymore. I'll never work with you again.
Well, I don't pump my own gas.
Well, okay. Oh, you live in New Jersey?
In New Jersey.
Yeah.
It's illegal to pump your own gas.
Yeah, I was going to say, you live in New Jersey. I know you. You, Carmine, you live in that state where I think it's ridiculous that you guys can't pump your own gas. Have you ever pumped your own gas before?
No, and I would actually have no idea how to.
Oh, my goodness. You know what? There's something
New Jersey
fun.
and Oregon, we're the 2 states that can't pump our own gas.
I think that's crazy. So let me just tell you something really quickly. The thing about pumping gas is, especially if you're a woman, is that you don't want to smell like gas. So you have to perfect, it's a method of taking the gas pump out of its holster and then putting it into the gas tank and pumping and then stopping and kind of, you know, waiting until all the drips come off and then taking it out and basically swinging it away from yourself to put it back in the holster so that none of the gas drips onto you, your car, or your shoes. That is like, if you know how to do that, you're a expert pumper of the gas. And also not driving away with the gas pump still in your car so that it rips off of the thing and it's so embarrassing. Those are the 2 things that you have to know how to do. You could do it. You would just need some practice. I think it's harder to learn how to pump gas if you're older. It's better if you're a teenager when you're
young. Well, I'm 40, Stacey, so you know.
Well, you're not old. You're still young. 40, that's young. But I'm going to say.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
No, I'm just going to say. I feel like you should come to Missouri, and that you should rent a car, and then you could follow me out. You could trail me out to my favorite big gas station. We go in and get some snacks while we've pumped our gas. You leave the gas pumping while you go inside and get snacks. You would love it.
You're going to teach me? Okay.
I would show you.
I would love to live in Missouri. I would love to live in a red state. I was having this conversation yesterday. I'm so out of place here.
It's pretty cool.
I'm so out of place here.
Yeah, it's pretty cool when you're like, I was in Bible study and the lady next to me was like, you know, I'm just so tired of all this liberalism in the school. And I almost hugged her. I was just like, you know, we're sitting here with our little Bibles open. I was like, what did you just say? Yes. So it happens all the time.
It's very hard in New Jersey. It's very hard because nobody agrees with me. And, you know, my mom, may she rest in peace, she would say we were the only 2 conservatives in New Jersey. So,
yeah, there may be 4 or 5, but you're pretty scarce there. You got to start converting some of those people into conservatives.
I try. I do try, but they're surrounded, you know. They're so inbred with what they believe. You understand, there are parts of New Jersey where there are conservatives, but the big cities always vote Democrat.
Yeah.
They're voting to keep themselves in poverty, and try explaining that to them, you're a racist and this and that and the other thing. And, you know, you can't get away with it, especially as a white guy. And I grew up in a pretty minority neighborhood. And so as soon as you try to tell people how they can better themselves, like, you don't know, you've never walked in those shoes. Okay, man, fine, but I got out of poverty and you didn't, so I mean, maybe you don't want to listen to me. I
tell you what, here's a cake taker. When someone's talking to you like that and you realize that they could easily make it out, and I don't mean easily like it's easy to get out of poverty, but it's a mindset change that has to be made. Once you've changed your mind about what your trajectory is, then the sky's the limit. You later look back, you're like, I don't even know why I stayed, you know, in that position for as long as I did. I just needed to change my mind. Change the mind first, and then the circumstances will follow.
Correct. People tend to take the easiest route, and that's the problem.
So, do you see the Mueller investigation? I'd heard tell that because there was really nothing left to it, they're going to try to get President Trump on some kind of obstruction charge connected to his activities when Flynn, the first person that they targeted, was being targeted. But other than that, there's no Russian collusion, which we all knew that all along. And so they're going to be wrapping it up.
So then you're going to get on. What was he trying to obstruct then?
Right. Well, I don't know.
What was he trying to obstruct?
I have no idea. I mean, I just think that the whole thing is a sham. But do you see it wrapping up? Because we're at, what is this, September 13th?
I do. I think you see it wrap up, especially if the Democrats win the House, and then they can get their impeachment done with. He's never going to get voted out by the Senate. So they're going to get their impeachment. They're going to try and embarrass him, and then we'll move on with our lives. So whatever their next outrage of the day is, we'll go with that. You know, I mean, this is all for 2020. That's all this is.
Do you really see them taking back the House? I don't.
I do. I think people want to believe there's going to be this imaginary red wave, but you know, the Democrats have all the energy right now. I would love to believe that we hold on to the House, but history. First of all, we're fighting a lot of things. History being one of them. The party not in power usually wins the midterms. President Trump's not on the ballot. You know, the sexy name isn't on the ballot, and it's going to be hard to drive that vote. We've got to drive the point home that not keeping the House means impeachment. That's got to be the mantra, and we've got to repeat it a million times. And President Trump has to push it, and then we have a shot. But right now, if I was in Vegas betting the odds, I'd bet on the Democrats taking the House.
But they're not taking the Senate.
No.
Interesting.
No.
You know what?
But even if they did, they even if they did, you need 2/3 of the Senate to vote for it to remove a president. It's not happening. It's not going to happen. It's a dream. But not removing him.
Well, I'm glad to hear some good news. You're a bit of a Debbie Downer today, Carmine, but I'm going to take it. I still enjoyed it. It's still good for me.
I'm sorry.
Don't be sorry. The truth is the best medicine. Thank you for coming on today. It's always a pleasure to speak with you. Have a great rest of your week.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Let's talk again soon. You know, guys,
Absolutely.
It's always wonderful to speak to someone like Carmine Sabia Jr., Christian conservative political pundit, radio host, editor, and friend of the show. Okay, when we get back, we'll have your calls at 866-963-2037, and I have more show for you, so stay right there.
What does it take to live an uncommon life? Here's former Super Bowl winning coach Tony Dungy with today's uncommon moment.
I always considered the members of my teams as family, but Tom Walter, the baseball coach at Wake Forest, has taken that family relationship to an entirely new level. One of his outfielders, Kevin Jordan, was so sick from a kidney disorder that he was on dialysis in his dorm room 8 hours a day, wondering if he would ever be able to play baseball again. That's when Coach Walter didn't hesitate to volunteer and donate a kidney to Kevin. You may never face a situation like Coach Walter and Kevin, but you may be called to do something else. As you strive to be like Christ, be ready to lovingly sacrifice something for others.
Tony Dungy, author of the popular Uncommon book series. Discover more at CoachDungy.com. That's CoachDungy.com.
Please call your senators today. It's time to put an end to the liberals' filibuster. Tell your senators to switch to a majority vote and defund Planned Parenthood now. Call the Capitol Switchboard at 202-224-3121 or go to afaaction.net. Again, call 202-224-3121 and tell your senators to switch to a majority vote and defund Planned Parenthood. Your call will make a difference.
Lonnie Poindexter.
Don't ever ask God for patience. Just say, oh, Lord, help me to be more patient. No, don't do that. Well, why, Lonnie? Why shouldn't I do that? He'll give it to you, but you're not going to like how you get it. Well, Lonnie, what do you mean? How do you get patience? Trials and tribulations, my brethren. That's how you get it.
Lion Chasers. Weekday mornings at 10 Central on Urban Family Talk.
Donald Trump's America.
The economy grew at a solid clip in August, the Federal Reserve's Beige Book showed, but concerns about tariffs are hurting business investment in some cases and starting to feed inflation. Businesses, particularly manufacturers, are dealing with higher material costs used to make products in part because of tariffs. In general, costs to make products are rising faster than the prices businesses can sell products for, and in some cases, companies are able to pass on higher costs to consumers. Dow Jones Associate Publisher researcher Jack Otter.
What concerns me slightly is the input costs.
He says if wages aren't rising fast enough, then we could get stagflation, though he says,
I don't think at this point the tariffs are a big enough deal to really slam the economy.
The Federal Reserve meets to set interest rates in 2 weeks. With the economy on solid ground and inflation building, this report reinforces another interest rate increase is likely. In Washington, Jennifer Schonberger, Fox News.
You can download episodes of Stacey on the Right from the podcast page on AFR.net or UrbanFamilyTalk.com. Now, back to the show on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Well, I mean, the argument that Mr. Strzok's making just doesn't hold water and doesn't pass the smell test. I mean, remember, this is the same guy that said, we will stop Trump. This is the same people who said that, Trump should lose 100 million to zero. So their bias was pretty darn clear from some of the earlier text messages we see. Now we see that there was a media strategy, a leak strategy to influence this whole thing. And we know this from the Inspector General's report. I remember one of the things the Inspector General cited, Sandra, was 13 different FBI people who were working with one reporter. Now, if that doesn't point to some kind of media strategy, leak strategy, I don't know what does.
We're all left wondering what exactly that is, because here's what Strzok's attorney issued via a statement. The attorney said, quote, the term media leak strategy in Mr. Strzok's text refers to a department-wide initiative to detect and stop leaks to the media. The president and his enablers are once again peddling unfounded conspiracy theories to mislead the American people.
Yeah, if their strategy was to stop the leaks, they sure didn't do a very good job because they were everywhere. Also, remember this, the dossier was the key. The dossier is what they took, uncorroborated, a non-credible dossier they took to the secret court to get the warrant to spy on the other campaign. That dossier was buttressed by leaks that they were giving to the press stories that were coming from the FBI, coming from the very sources who put together the dossier. It is never supposed to work that way, but in fact it did. And so now for them to say, oh, no, we were working to try to stop this, just doesn't pass the smell test, as I said before.
It doesn't. It doesn't pass the smell test. And one of the most important things we can do is, first of all, just be informed about all of this, and then try to hold people accountable, namely our elected officials. And I tend to be much more on the optimistic side about all of this. Obviously, I want to be informed. I want to get the information out there. But the information is meant to spur us to action, to pray, to fast, to, focus our energies on rendering unto Caesar that which is Caesar's, which means active participation in our government as citizens. It's not meant to be, to make people sad. It's not meant for that. It's meant for the opposite. It's meant to spur us on to action. So Jim Jordan goes on to discuss the media leak strategy a little bit further. It's number 4.
I want to make sure that we highlight this text that was first outlined in that letter by Mark Meadows, the Republican from North Carolina. It said, I had literally just gone to find this phone to tell you I want to talk to you about media leak strategy with DOJ before you go. And Meadows is obviously making the case about the media leak strategy, while Strzok and his attorney are saying that text is being completely taken out of context.
Yeah, I mean, again, look at the history. Who are you going to believe? I think Mark has it exactly right. I think Peter Strzok, with all we've learned about him, remember, he was the key agent. He was the guy who ran the Clinton investigation, started and ran the Trump-Russia investigation. Remember all these key people at the FBI. James Comey, director, fired. Andy McCabe, deputy director, fired. Peter Strzok, deputy director of counterintelligence, first demoted, then fired. Jim Rybicki left the FBI, chief of staff. Jim Baker, chief counsel, was first demoted, then left the FBI. And Lisa Page, FBI counsel, was demoted and then left the FBI. Those key people ran both of these investigations, and now they're telling us, oh, don't worry, we were actually trying to work this out and stop the media leaks, when we know the media leaks were used to buttress the dossier when it was taken to the FISA court.
So what else can we say? Hey, that's the ticket. So now at this point, the question is, have we found any Russian collusion? Have we found any obstruction of justice, obstructing the finding out about the collusion? Carmine made a fantastic point. Hey, if there's no collusion with the Russians, then how could anyone have obstructed anything? What did they obstruct exactly? Nothing. If prosecution was completed against Flynn and also Manafort, and others, then what was obstructed exactly? Nothing. I mean, it's a huge nothing burger. And it's a waste of our tax dollars. It's a waste of our time and energy. But of course, we'd rather be discussing that than discussing real items. Now, this is where, it just gets so dirty. And it's Dianne Feinstein. Carmine mentioned this. He alluded to this just a tad ago about, first of all, the Kavanaugh vote has been scheduled for September 20th, so a week from now. And you've got the Senate Judiciary Chairman, Chuck Grassley. He's scheduled it for a full Senate vote so that you'll have the chair and that committee vote on the 20th. And then prior to the end of the month, the entire Senate will vote to confirm or not to confirm. Now, there's been a scheme that, it's the last ditch card to play. They played the race card, didn't work. Kavanaugh is so well versed in Plessy v. Ferguson and his subsequent opinions, all 307 of them, I think there are. In numerous opinions, he's demonstrated an overt penchant for finding anything that might be inequitable in the law and making sure to come down on the side of justice and fair treatment for whoever the defendant was, including when the defendant was a black person. So he's so ironclad in that area that the race card wouldn't work on him. So what are they going to do? They're going to go for the sexual harassment, sexual misconduct card. Now, I can tell you, I honestly didn't see it coming. I was still reading stories about how Senator Collins they've now raised well over $1 million to try to bribe her into not voting for Justice Kavanaugh, as if that's okay. Also, they've been sending her coat hangers to her office. Over 3,000 coat hangers have been mailed to her at her office. Who in America today thinks that if abortion was outlawed, women would go to coat hanger abortions? That is the most ridiculous scare tactic. It's so ridiculous, it's not scary. That is not what women would do. So, you've got Feinstein coming up with, basically it's slander. She says that there's an allegation that back when Justice Kavanaugh was in high school, he had sexual misconduct. And she's referring the sexual misconduct charge to federal authorities for immediate investigation, because once they launch an investigation, well, then we won't be able to vote. And they think if they could just delay the vote, that they could stop Senators, Murkowski and Collins from voting for the nominee. She says she's not releasing any details. She's allowing for, obviously the maximum amount of innuendo and gossip. And of course, this is a disingenuous and transparently political public release that she issued. It says news from Dianne Feinstein, United States Senator for California, and it's got her letterhead on it with the California Republic, the bear symbol. It's a press release, and she says, I have received information from an individual concerning the nomination of Brett Kavanaugh. Now, remember, this is something that could have been possibly issued when should this have been shared? Now? Should it have been shared now, or should it have been shared, I don't know how long ago it should have been shared, but am I right that this is not the right time? It should have been shared when he was being elevated to a circuit court judge, and all the other times that he's been in the public up for consideration for these roles. Isn't any of those times would have been good? No. I'm a woman, and so there's no misogyny or you hate women or This is fake. It's not just fake, it's fake news. Someone drummed up for the specific purpose of Herman caning Brett Kavanaugh. Believe it, this is garbage. If it was a legitimate claim, why would this woman not have come up with the claim and against him when he became first able to, be a jurist over cases? So she says, quote, I have received information from an individual concerning the nomination of Brett Kavanaugh to the Supreme Court. The individual strongly requested confidentiality, declined to come forward or press the matter further. I have honored that decision. I have, however, referred the matter to federal investigative authorities. Now, what does that sound like to you? Does it sound like garbage? Because it It kind of sounds like garbage to me. Sounds like utter garbage. So that's their game. That's what they're doing here. She's going to play this whole idea that he's some kind of sexual predator. And he's been so, and then he got married, and then he had daughters, and he's been running around coaching Little League and soccer, and he's been going to Nationals games with his friends, and he's just been living his life all this whole time. Meanwhile, he did this dastardly deed back when he was a high schooler, no less. Now, remember, these are the same people who felt like Bill Clinton's behavior, to put it mildly, back when he was a governor, that those behaviors, the payoffs, all of that, that was off limits when he was running for the presidency. It was off limits when he was president. It was off limits when we found out he was still doing things, this time with interns, that it was still off limits. Remember how it was always off limits? And then it became only within limits when Me Too, the movement, decided it was time to go ahead and take him down because he was no longer politically useful. Now here we are, this same dude, no longer politically useful. You can toss him out of the herd. He's no longer a part of this group. You can't sit with us. You are not one of us. Now they're going to try to take something that is an allegation, nothing substantial, nothing that has actually happened. They're going to use that against Brett Kavanaugh, who's been vetted. So he's been vetted. He's been investigated. He's been looked into. But some person who doesn't want to come forward isn't, you have a right to face your accuser in this country. And that's the thing about the Me Too movement that I find absolutely ridiculous. There have been some of these cases where the women have not come forward, and so people are losing their jobs and having their reputations ruined without having the opportunity to face their accuser. So Chad Pergram says from colleague John Roberts, reports that a source familiar says Feinstein has been aware of allegations regarding Kavanaugh since July, but just came forward now. From The Intercept, it purportedly describes an incident that was relayed to someone affiliated with Stanford University who authored the letter and sent it to Representative Anna Eshoo, a Democrat who represents the area. So sources who heard from a source that got it from someone. Sources who heard from a source that got it from someone at the collegiate level about something that happened when Kavanaugh was in high school. So first of all, was he a minor? Because if he was a minor when it occurred, then it's a completely different matter in and of itself. So kind of like my grandma's aunt's best friend's sister-in-law, her hairdresser, the hairdresser's boyfriend, whose son is best friends with the girlfriend of one of her colleagues from back when she was in high school, heard that Justice Brett Kavanaugh might have had some indiscretions in high school. Figure that one out. It's kind of like a game we could play. We could have people actually just list off all the different connections that could possibly be the source of some kind of spurious, this person did this or that. How many of us want to have to go through that? I heard that back when you were in high school. Who'd you hear it from? I heard it from my uncle's third cousin's ex-wife. The son of that woman, his girlfriend gets her nails done at a shop. The nail salon tech has a boyfriend whose mom, she said she heard it. Who wants to even do, what? So that's what we've got going on here. I mean, and she's inferring, so Senator Dianne Feinstein's referring this to the federal investigative authorities. And that, my friends, is how you get someone investigated if you're a senator. But if you don't want them investigated, then you just don't do that. Namely Hillary Clinton. Why am I still talking about Hillary Clinton? Because it's relevant. She's never been prosecuted for any of her crimes. Yet Brett Kavanaugh is now going to have his name dragged through the mud. His daughters are going to have to hear about this fake story. His wife's going to have to put up with people casting aspersions on her husband. You know, basically trying to tear their whole family up. No honor. Blatantly and utterly despicable to the very core. Disgusting and absolutely without honor. That's what this is. From high school. Maybe Justice Kavanaugh went to high school with Anita Hill. So, you know, I have no words. I mean, I guess I had some words. I just put them out and now I got nothing left. So we'll see what happens. I hope this backfires. I hope that people begin to see how ridiculous it is and that you wouldn't ever want someone to do this to you. Remember sowing and reaping? Nobody gets away with anything. That's the good news. But we have to put up with it while they are basking in all of their glorious sin. All right, when we get after the break, you can actually head over to afr.net and check out the content there. Have a great day.
Family Talk. American Family Coffee is coffee with a cause. Not only is it a delicious way to start your day, but it can also wake you up to the idea of supporting the American Family Association through a product you'd normally buy anyway. Choose from morning blend, evening blend, and everything in between. Get your American Family Coffee and support the American Family Association at afastore.net. Truth, wisdom, empowerment. Urban Family Talk, a ministry of the American Family Association.
American Family News on the Hour. I'm Chad Groening. Hurricane Florence is at the doorstep of North and South Carolina, and she's not going away anytime soon. Outer bands from the hurricane are now lashing land. At least a full day before, the National Hurricane Center expects the slow-moving storm's eye to blow ashore around the North Carolina-South Carolina line. And as Hurricane Florence approaches the Carolina coastline, one of the largest military bases in the country is opening its gates to other military personnel.
The largest Marine Corps base on the East Coast is opening its gates to anyone with the Department of Defense ID. Camp Lejeune, potentially in the bullseye of 100-plus miles per hour winds and several feet of rainfall. But officials are confident in the base's infrastructure, pointing to its 77 years as a successful safe haven. The 156,000-acre base, including 11 miles of beachfront, boasts large military vehicles, the capability to filter and distribute water, and 3 emergency shelters.
They'll move on to stage 2.
First Lieutenant Charles Strauss runs one of the shelters and encourages guests to bring toiletries, games, and 72 hours worth of provisions.
We are going to try and make this as comfortable of a place as possible, but comfort isn't our priority. Right? Our main concern is safety and facilitating as many people as we can take in as possible.
In Jacksonville, North Carolina, Emily Ikeda, Fox News.
The family of an abortion victim is taking their case to court over her death in Albuquerque. Here's AFN's Charlie Butts.
Keisha Atkins walked into Southwestern Women's Options in Albuquerque, and that's when her journey with death began. Elisa Martinez of the New Mexico Alliance for Life picks up the story.
Keisha was a healthy 23-year-old woman who sought an elective late-term abortion at Southwestern Women's Options Clinic that happens to do abortions throughout all 9 months of pregnancy to about 35 weeks.
Atkins had to be rushed to the hospital at the University of New Mexico, where doctors in the emergency room worked to save her life, but she died.
She had experienced a massive septic infection from this abortion procedure, which she contracted under the care of Southwest Women's Options, which is owned by the co-founder of the National Abortion Federation, Curtis Boyd.
An autopsy was done, and natural causes listed as the reason she died. A healthy 23-year-old woman who experienced septic infection from an abortion. Septic infection and abortion are not natural causes of death. In fact, doctors who treated her were shocked to learn her death ruled as natural. Family members have filed suit against the hospital, several of its medical staff, Curtis Boyd, and the pathologist who did the autopsy, alleging wrongful death and a cover-up. I'm Charlie Butts.
September is National Suicide Prevention Month, and one organization is reminding gun owners that securely storing their firearms could help save the life of someone going through a difficult time. AFN's Chris Woodward has more.
In addition to keeping guns away from those who should not have access to them, the National Shooting Sports Foundation says reaching out to a person you're concerned about can be extremely important. NSSF's Bill Brassard.
The experts tell us that asking someone directly about suicide and encouraging them to seek help, it won't put that person at greater risk for harming themselves.
Last year, NSSF partnered with the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention on a national firearms and suicide prevention program. NSSF supports an initiative to reduce the annual suicide rate in the U.S. 20% by the year 2025.
You can find out how to do that and much more at afsp.org/firearms or at nssf.org/safety. NSSF has a new program out in conjunction with AFSP that provides materials to firearms retailers and shooting ranges on suicide prevention and helps its customers and their customers, understand more about this topic.
I'm Chris Woodward.
And that is American Family News on the Hour. I'm Chad Groening.
Abraham Hamilton III.
God put us in this world at this time to be salt and light. We don't fool because of the darkness that we're facing. This is not the first time in the world's history that it's gotten dark. God has called you and I to be his ambassadors, even in this dark moment.
Tune in to the Hamilton Corner, weekdays at 5 p.m. Central on Urban Family Talk. She's sharp, pointed, and insightful. This is Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
While people might have had issues with the term socialist, a lot of people, when they looked at the actual things that they believed in, health care for all, free college tuition, actual equality, shrinking the gap between poor people and rich people in this country, they thought that they agreed with that.
There's a lot of different material to cover here with a judge who has been a partisan, engaged in both the Bush White House and the Ken Starr, the Judge Starr investigation of the Clinton White House, and given his 300 opinions on the D.C. Circuit. We want full disclosure. We want a lot of information that's now classified to be disclosed, but there are proper ways of disclosing this. And you know who's at fault for this more than anyone else? Comey, because he leaked information and laundered it through a professor at Columbia Law School. Shame on that professor, and shame on Comey.
And now, Stacy Washington.
Welcome to the program. Good to be with you today. Fantastic to have you listening to the show. Head over to urbanfamilytalk.com/Stacy. Also, you can find out more on Facebook and YouTube and Twitter, all Stacy on the Right, especially the Instagram. You can follow, do whatever you'd like. Love to see you there. Thanks for being here today. So right now we are talking about, we've been talking about Justice Kavanaugh and these horrible, so they're now going to do a whisper campaign against him because they can't beat him, because he was unflappable under pressure, because their questions were inane and inept and ridiculous. And so because there's no way to win legally, lawfully, with honor, we're now throwing off any semblance of uprightness and fairness and equanimity, and we are just going to get down in the dirt and, roll around, just free for all. Just no rules, nothing is barred. Just do whatever you want. Just, tear the man up. Just no consideration for his wife, for his daughters. Just drag something out. You don't have to know if it's true. You don't even have to have a verifiable source. Just impugn his character, throw some mud onto him. Whatever sticks, we'll go with that. That's where we are right now. So Chuck Todd had actually made this comment on his program before this latest foray into mudslinging by, Feinstein. He says there's these extreme tactics being used against the other side of the aisle. It's number 5.
All right, I've got to ask you about some of the tactics of some of the special interest groups. You've heard report there's been coat hangers sent to Senator Susan Collins' office, some really nasty voicemails that have been played. The tactics. It seems that the extreme tactics being used, I'm sure you get that there's a lot of passion. What do you make of them?
Yes. There is a huge amount of passion, as I think the whole country saw. Dozens of people were arrested in the course of the hearings. All of our offices have gotten hundreds, if not thousands, of calls, many on a daily basis. And I think that's well justified because of the level of fear, of concern, of anxiety, both about the unpredictable behavior of our president and the ways in which the Supreme Court may very well shift to a conservative majority for years or decades to come on some vital issues about individual liberty in this country. I'll take your point, though, Chuck. I do think it may end up backfiring in that it may turn off several of the key centrist votes, both Republican and Democrat, who are willing to consider a vote against Kavanaugh as they're weighing their decision here in the last days.
And that would be fine, right? That would be perfectly fine if that's what they were doing. But it's not. And if I sound like I'm a little, upset to see them doing this to him, it's because it's not fair. It is fair to question him in the harshest possible terms, even treating him as what you would consider to be a hostile witness. It is fair to put the screws to him, if you will, when he's sitting at that table with the microphone in front of him, submitting himself to questions. It's fair to vet him there. It's fair to ask him whatever you have to ask, but to wait until he's no longer in front of the cameras, to wait until he can no longer defend himself in front of, there were tens of thousands of people on the live streams. I would click through, and C-SPAN was so bogged down, I couldn't get on their website to live stream it. I listened to the Kavanaugh hearings on my cell phone, on the C-SPAN app. I listened on other media outlets were streaming it as well. Millions of Americans paid attention to his testimony. They wanted to see who this man was. They stopped from working and having lunch and drinking coffee and working out and walking dogs and burping babies and putting kids down for naps. Everyone paused for a second and found a way to listen or watch and paid attention. So many millions of Americans. So now that Americans have gone back to burping babies, driving kids to and from soccer, whatever you do during the day, working, sleeping, eating, washing clothes, whatever you're doing, you've gone back to doing that during the day. And now Feinstein tries to resurrect what she calls a credible allegation, but without an accuser, without any details. It's just a rumor, and he can't answer for it. He's no longer at the Senate Judiciary panel being asked questions. He's now submitting to written interrogatories. People are sending him questions, huge lists of questions that I guess they just couldn't get to in the hours and hours and hours that he spent before them. It's absolutely ridiculous. Oh, it's so insulting. But this is the same woman. She actually hired someone, and he worked for her for 30 years and heard all of her secrets and everything as her driver. Turns out he was a Chinese spy. But she's got the audacity to talk about something someone did when they were in high school that she's not even going to provide any actual evidence for. I mean, she's really got a lot of gall. It's unbelievable. So we've also got news out, and again, if you think one bit of news can't top another, just buckle up. Here it is. Planned Parenthood has named their new president after Cecile Richards, who stepped down. She's made her millions on killing unborn kids. Now it's Leana Wen. She claims that she's doing life-saving work, and she always has. Yeah, that's my I don't believe it face. So here we have Leana Wen. She's known for her abortion advocacy in Baltimore, where she attempted to force pregnancy centers to promote abortions. she's engaging in ironic statements already, praising Planned Parenthood for life-saving work. Planned Parenthood actually kills more people, because unborn babies are people. They're just inside someone else, but they're still people. They kill more people each year than cancer or guns or cigarettes. A lot more people than guns. For more than 100 years, no organization has done more for women's health than Planned Parenthood. I'm truly honored to be named its president, she said in a written statement. As a patient, I depend upon Planned Parenthood for medical care at various times in my own life, and as a public health leader, I've seen firsthand the life-saving work it does for our most vulnerable communities. As a doctor, I will ensure we continue to provide high-quality health care, including a full range of reproductive care, and will fight with everything I have to protect the access of millions of patients who rely on Planned Parenthood. End quote. So when also in her past work advocating for disadvantaged communities, oversaw Baltimore's lawsuit against the Trump administration over its attempt to defund the Planned Parenthood of Baltimore, that whole group, and reroute taxpayer dollars to programs for teen pregnancy programs at places that actually help cut teen pregnancy. In 2017, the Trump administration also cut millions of dollars in grants to Planned Parenthood through the failed teen pregnancy prevention program. HHS spokesman Mark Vaviades said the New York Times, he was speaking to the New York Times last year, he said that there's very little evidence that the program was successful. Now, look, it's fine that they've hired someone new. She's actually Baltimore's top health official, and she'll be leaving that slot on October 12th to assume her duties for Planned Parenthood full time. She also tried to make it the law in Baltimore that kids could get contraception without their parents. So we gotta do this right now. So, if you're a parent, you've probably run up against this brick wall recently because these are new rules that have been enacted and they make sense. And that is, let's say your kid's at school and they go to their teacher and they say, my head hurts. And what you would think is that the teacher would say, I'll give you some Tylenol, or would you like an aspirin? Would you like a Motrin? Well, teachers were doing that, and sometimes they'd send the kid to the nurse, and the nurse would say, it's an over-the-counter medication, so I'm going to give it to you. And parents had objections to that, but mainly the school districts themselves saw those as openings for some kind of, it's liability. It's, risk assessment. You don't want to give a child a pill, even if it's an over-the-counter pill, because you need their parents' permission. And so parental rights advocates and health advocates, everyone said, look, you need to have a permission slip at the beginning of the year. And so all of us do this now. We've been doing this for years. At the beginning of the school year, you have to turn in a physical or an updated shot record, or if your kid is not slated for any shots that year, the one piece of paper you have to turn in besides sports health physical, if they're going to do sports, is you have to sign a permission slip saying that the school nurse can give your child, and then they have a list. Sometimes it'll say Benadryl, ibuprofen, and one other pain reliever, Aleve. Sometimes it'll be the specific brand name. Other times it'll be the active ingredient. Sometimes it will say, in addition to, maybe your child has an EpiPen, maybe your child has, an inhaler that they're already doing. So it's in addition to that authorization, you're just basically saying, if my child has a cough and they want some cough syrup, and every school is different as to what they'll dish out to your child. So again, just so we set the stage here, in order for your child to get a Tylenol or a Zyrtec from their school nurse, they need a written authorization from the parent, which usually includes a disclaimer. In other words, if your child takes this Tylenol and goes into convulsions, we are not responsible because you've given us permission to give your child the Tylenol. But what Wen tried to do was to get it so that you would have to still give permission to give, a Tylenol, a Benadryl, a Zyrtec, what have you. But your child could go to the nurse and say, I'd like an IUD. And the nurse could say, oh, would you? Okay, come in tomorrow at right after lunch, and we'll get you one. We'll get you one of those. Make sure you got that. An IUD. Or if your kid said, you know what I really need? I need some contraception, some oral contraception. Your daughter. She wanted to make it so that while you still need to have an authorization to give the child a Tylenol, they could get birth control on demand without even so much as a notification. Oh, by the way, in an email, dear Mr. and Mrs. So-and-so, John Q. Public, we gave your daughter through a 90-day supply of oral contraception, and it's these 2 drugs, active ingredients. Thanks so much, and also goodbye. Not even a note. So your child could be taking the contraception, could be falling out, passing out, having blood clots, whatever the side effects. We all know there are these side effects with these birth control pills. And wherever you fall on that, God bless you. This is America. Have whatever thoughts and feelings you have about it. But why is there such an inconsistency with people who advocate for abortion and people who advocate for this, kind of free range sex society that the number one priority is making sure everyone has contraception? Contraceptives have been known to have side effects that are really, really difficult to manage depending on the person's hormonal makeup, their age, their weight, their previous exposure to other prescription and non-prescription drugs. This is a decision that should be made in a setting with a licensed OBGYN, the patient, and if she's a minor, one of her parents. So the parent would know, she woke up with a fever today. I wonder what's wrong with her. I'll just give her a Tylenol. No, she woke up with a fever after taking contraception. She started to take contraception. She had just had an IUD implanted in her at her school by who knows who. You would want to know that. If you don't know your child has had basically a small medical procedure, outpatient, sure, but still a procedure, and you're at home and your child has a fever, you could very well just let them, let it run its course. 24 hours, we'll check it again. Just sleep it off. Here's some chicken soup, sleep it off. You probably have a virus. And your child has been implanted with an IUD, your daughter. She could have sepsis. She could have a localized infection. And you won't know because this woman, Dr. Wen, feels like you don't need to know that. You need to know if your kid's taking Tylenol, though. This is what's going on here. It's outrageous. All right, when we get back, we're going to be talking about those Strzok texts and global right to be forgotten in Europe. Stay there.
"80% of the time, an abortion-minded mother who views an ultrasound or sonogram of her baby will choose life. Here's the story of Candace.
The sonogram sealed the deal for me. My baby was like this tiny little spectrum of hope. And I saw his heart beating on the screen. And knowing that there's life growing inside, that sonogram changed my life. I went from just Candace to Mom. Thank you to everybody that has given these gifts. You guys are giving more than money. You guys are giving love.
There are currently preborn centers which do not have an ultrasound machine. Would you sponsor a machine today? Dial pound 250 and say keyword baby. That's pound 250 and say baby. Or go to preborn.com. That's preborn.com. Your love could save a life.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
Two of the founding fathers that deserve more attention are Alexander Hamilton and James Madison. While the Hamilton musical provides us with some perspectives and entertainment, I would recommend the book by Jay Cost, The Price of Greatness, Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, and the Creation of American Oligarchy. He was on the Point of View radio program to talk about his book. These two men belonged to a political movement with three fundamental foundations. The first was the commitment to liberal government that emphasized the protection of individual rights. The Declaration of Independence argued that governments are instituted among men in order to secure certain unalienable rights. That idea, written by Thomas Jefferson, was influenced by the writings of John Locke. The second foundation was a belief in self-government, often referred to as republicanism. A republic allowed the citizens to be governed by laws that they actually had a hand in creating. A monarch did not hand down these laws. They were established by we the people. The third foundation was nationalism. The 13 separate colonies agreed to bind themselves together in a national union of 13 states. This is where there was the greatest division between Federalist and Anti-Federalist, and they ended up dividing Hamilton from Madison. Hamilton emphasized national vigor and was eager to promote the Bank of the United States and other programs that would grow the national government. Madison, on the other hand, wanted to pursue what he called the Republican balance. He feared that Hamilton's policies favored the wealthy. In reading this book by Jay Cost, I was struck by the reality that many of the debates in the founding of this country continue to this day. Many of the ideas put forward by Hamilton and Madison are still debated today in the halls of Congress. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
From Universal 1440, Unbroken, Path to Redemption, the rest of World War II hero Louis Zamperini's true story, in theaters September 14th, rated PG-13.
This is Stacy on the Right with Stacy Washington on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Welcome back to the program. StacyOnTheRight.com is where you can subscribe, get all the info about what we're doing, and you can also head over to nationalcenter.org and find out more about what we're doing over there at that website. Thanks for being here today. Call lines are open at 866-963-2037. It's a pleasure to be with you, and I'm really excited about the different fun things that we're going to be doing. We have that event tomorrow here in St. Louis with the Hidden Heart Ministry and the Joy in the Morning event that we're going to be doing. And then I'm going to be speaking at the Gun Rights Policy Conference in Chicago. I'm on a panel with A.W.R. Hawkins, who is a doctor and gun writer. He writes about the Second Amendment and firearms. He has a podcast. And then Mark Walters, who is a fantastic gun rights advocate. We're going to be on a panel together discussing a number of things. It's going to be really fun, and it should be live streamed. So if you follow me on Twitter, you'll be able to catch the live stream link there. It's on a Saturday, so I'll be doing the show here and then traveling to Chicago, doing that, and then, onward and upward. So it's going to be pretty fun. And then, of course, in October, I'm speaking at the Unconventional Women's Business Network on it's kind of like the story from stay-at-home mom and volunteer to radio host. So we're going to be talking about that. Unconventional Business Women's Network is a network of women who are Christian leaders, Christian business owners, etc., who seek to form relationships and mentor and kind of encourage each other in today's business environment, which I try never to impugn America's business environment because we have such an amazing economic engine. But in certain environments, it can be kind of tough to be a person of faith. And so Unconventional Business Women seeks to connect women up who are Christians and help them to facilitate better relationships in the business environment. So it's going to be pretty exciting to speak to them. I'm going to be their keynote that evening at the event. And so that's happening in October. And you can find all the links to that stuff on my Instagram and also on the Facebook. I keep posting the little flyers and things, so it's going to be exciting. So right now so you got Judicial Watch, and Judicial Watch does all the heavy lifting on behalf of Americans. They file the Freedom of Information requests. They will sometimes sue the government when the government refuses to honor their request for information. And they're the ones who get that information and make it available to us. And so you probably thought the whole Strzok text thing, that you'd heard all there was to hear. We've got to stop him. He can't be all that stuff. Well, there's more. And so, again, scratch a scandal, find a Democrat, Peter Strzok, Hillary supporter. He wasn't done texting and telling all of the good stuff. It's number 2.
Well, you may not have noticed, but last week Judicial Watch obtained new documents from the FBI. They were trying, it looks like, to rehabilitate Steele, but they found that they couldn't really believe in the dossier. And this is this is subsequent to other documents we found. And this is a quote from the documents. The FBI said Steele was deemed not suitable as a confidential human source, and he was not to collect intelligence on behalf or for the FBI. So this is the FBI's own documents showing that Steele was to be kept away from, and they, as you point out, corruptly continued to use him anyway. One intermediate step that can be done is the Office of Special Counsel which is charged with making sure that federal officials don't abuse their offices to advance a political agenda, like under the Hatch Act, for instance, which prohibits political activities by federal employees in most circumstances, can conduct a criminal or serious investigation into what Strzok was up to. He clearly had anti-Trump bias. He clearly was using FBI resources to advance that bias, to stop Trump, as he says, and have an insurance policy. The Office of Special Counsel, which is not in the Justice Department, can conduct an independent criminal investigation. So I think that's one area that we can draw attention to as an opportunity for more accountability for Strzok, because he has zero credibility. His lawyers are telling us, don't believe what you read in his emails and text messages, and obviously that's not persuasive. Even the FBI had to let him go because it didn't become credible anymore.
And so that's the danger. The danger is of having these huge governmental agencies that Americans no longer trust, that Americans feel are not worth the tax dollars. And I know, as a conservative, as a person of, I really believe in a much more limited government than the one we're experiencing right now. There are a number of agencies that it's not about trust, it's just about is it necessary? And if you've ever had a tight budget and you go through it and you're like, man, there's not enough liquidity here. We can't do things we want to do. And then, especially if you're married and you and your husband are kind of going over the list, and it'll be, yeah, that's nice, but is it necessary? Do we need to pay for that? And as you go down the list, the first time you go through the list, almost nothing gets crossed off because it's all necessary. You need it all. Then you give it some time. You give it a few days, and you start thinking about, do you really want to take a vacation, or do you really want to maybe, buy a house or buy a new house? Do you really want to move into that school district, or maybe put those kids in that school that costs money instead of the public school? And then you go back to the list. And all of a sudden, it's almost like somebody went through and highlighted, or that the fonts have been changed to red of the stuff that needs to be cut. And then once you've switched in your mind, you've decided, I'm willing to make some sacrifices to get to this number, to get this one thing, to do this whatever. It's amazing how not only are they highlighted in red and you're ready to cut them, but you'll go to it with, precision, slice. You're cutting stuff out. Then you see the number one number starts shrinking, the other one starts to grow, and you're like, that spurs you on. Now, what can we pay off to get this number up to where we need to get it? It's amazing. But we don't ever have that process with the government. Notice we never have a government reduction committee that comes in, or a government accountability and reduction committee. Just imagine it for a second. Just picture it. This government accountability committee would, kind of like the audits that the Missouri State Auditor does, where they do 100 audits a year. And current candidates are looking at, maybe trying to increase that number through efficiency. So they go to a school district and they look at all the numbers, they look at everything, and they audit it to make sure that the taxpayer money is being spent the way they've been told it's being spent, and also it's being spent in ways that are lawful and legal and certain parameters. There's no fraud, there's no waste, there's no abuse, there's no missing money. There's just everything is it's supposed to be. Imagine if we had a committee that went through and, the Federal Register, the federal government's budget, trillions of dollars. Obviously, this would have to be a committee that was comprised of some very, very intelligent number crunchers, money people from the private sector, people who'd run successful multi-billion-dollar businesses. They come in and they look at, for example, the Department of Justice and audit it. They look at the EPA, audit it. They look at the White House, audit, and then make the results of that audit public. And then, just like when school districts actually do have audits of their school districts that they pay a private auditing company to do. I know that because I was on a school board, and when we would receive our audit back from it was a business that we paid to do it. When we would get it back, we would actually have to sign as elected officials to say that we read the audit and that we accepted its findings. And it gives a grade, like a score of how well financially the district is performing. So imagine if we had this committee of private sector individuals, not people who are, no lobbyists permitted, no contact with lobbyists is permitted, no gifts are permitted, and you're not paid to do the work. And it's a voluntary position, and because audits take months and months and months to do when it's a multi-million-dollar type of an operation. If it were multiple billions of dollars, the audit would take even longer, but at some point the audit would be able to be completed. And then afterwards, the health rating for that agency or that whatever it is would be given. The American people would get to see it, and then the recommendations underneath would get to be published. And then our elected officials, the representative government process is really important, will get to say, okay, so in order to get the health of the EPA up from a D- to an A, they recommend these actions. Let's vote on it. Wouldn't that be something? Wouldn't that be amazing to, first of all, to have some accountability for our tax dollars, to have people who are unelected have free reign over our tax dollars. I know this because my parents work for the federal government. I know how the budgeting process works there. It's not zero-based. It's how much money did you get last year? How much money did you spend? If you spent less than you got, the amount that you spent is the amount that you get the next year. You don't have to justify it. You just have to spend it all. That's why you've seen the stories, which they don't publish them anymore because it embarrasses certain parts in the political, sphere. Certain people are embarrassed by it, but you go out and buy a few $900 chairs. Why? Because we had a few $1,000s left in the budget that wasn't spent, and we need to get it spent or we lose that amount for next year. Never mind the fact that if you spent less this year than you did last year, but you still did your job, then you really don't need the money that you got last year. You need that new amount, the lesser amount. So it's not about, it's like a game. Well, they gave us $4 billion for this year, and we better spend every penny of it. So the last 30 days, it's a spending spree. New desks, new chairs, upgrades to the parking lot, new containers for the landscaping outside the flowers, hire on a new person to do a contract to clean just the lobby. All kinds of crazy stuff. Everybody gets a new desktop. Everybody gets a second monitor on their desk. We just got to spend this money. Get these line items reconciled so we can get this over to the budget analysts department so they can make sure that we have our requisition for next year is the same number plus whatever increase in the budget is permitted because of inflation. Imagine if we had a way to put a stop to that. Instead, we have these agencies just operating with impunity. The people who work there are not elected. And the representative form of government that we have means that some elected official at some point should be held responsible for this rampant overspending. But somehow that's been missed. So now I want to pivot over to this global right to be forgotten in search. Calling it a battle between privacy and free speech, you've got Katie Collins writing this piece up. The judges who are making the decision about this are going to issue their opinion December 11th, and their decision about what to do about Google's, kind of fight will affect other search engines as well. So here's what's at stake. Lawyers for Google faced Europe's top judges on Tuesday to argue against upholding the rights of European citizens to have links about them removed from search results across the whole of the internet rather than just within the EU, which is the current arrangement. So under European Union law, European citizens can appeal to have certain information that's out of date, incorrect, or embarrassing about them removed from search results, and this is the so-called right to be forgotten. A chamber of 15 judges at the European Court of Justice will decide the extent to which this law should apply with an opinion that's due on December 11th. The decision by the judges on how to interpret EU law will affect not only Google, but other search engines like Bing and Yahoo. If it decides against Google in this case, search companies will be required to make information delisted in Europe delisted everywhere. For European citizens, that means their right to privacy will be upheld across the entire internet. Now, here's what's so interesting about this. What they describe in the piece is that what happens is you have these European citizens who they'll say, that was 8 years ago, that was 10 years ago. I no longer feel that way. I'm tired of it being brought up in search. So they'll apply and Google will remove those links from the EU internet. But anyone who wants to see those results can go to the worldwide internet, the international internet, by typing in the direct link to that and then search and still find the information. So it's not really removed if everybody has ready access to it. So the judges are tackling two questions. Firstly, whether this information should just be delisted in Europe or globally. And secondly, whether certain sensitive information like political opinions, health data, criminal convictions should be deleted automatically rather than having to undergo review as a part of an appeal. Because right now, these European citizens have to appeal to Google to remove the information. Now, Google and other search engines have been obliged to comply with the right to be forgotten since 2014 ruling by the European Court of Justice. The search giant was firmly opposed to the ruling and enlisted the help of free speech advocates to protest. Unfortunately for Google, the ECJ had the final word on the application of the EU law, and in order to continue operating in the region, the company had no choice but to comply. So Google created a compliance team to handle removal requests from within the EU. But until now, Google has only scrubbed information it was required to remove from search results in its regional subdomains, so google.co.uk. For example, search on just plain old google.com, the information would still appear. Now, this whole thing has caused Google to argue this week that it already removes enough links from search results within Europe and shouldn't have to remove the links globally. Applying the law has cast Google in the twin roles of watchdog, making calls about the privacy of European citizens, and of a free speech advocate. Since 2014, the company has delisted 44% of the requested URLs following review. So that's not half. Half is 50. So the right to be forgotten debate is often seen as a conflict between the right of the individual to privacy and the rights of wider society to free speech. Civil society groups, campaigners, and activists on both sides of the argument were in court on Tuesday. And, you know, it's an interesting thing. I can see where people might say you shouldn't be able to have, you know, sex offender information removed because that protects the right of the public to know. And I can also see where someone would say, I used to be maybe a communist and now I'm not anymore and I want that information removed. And, you know, Google doesn't want to remove anything. So, all right, we'll be back with more right after this. Stay there.
What does it take to live an uncommon life? Here's former Super Bowl winning coach Tony Dungy with today's uncommon moment.
I always considered the members of my teams as family, but Tom Walter, the baseball coach at Wake Forest, has taken that family relationship to an entirely new level. One of his outfielders, Kevin Jordan, was so sick from a kidney disorder that he was on dialysis in his dorm room 8 hours a day, wondering if he would ever be able to play baseball again. That's when Coach Walter didn't hesitate to volunteer and donate a kidney to Kevin. You may never face a situation like Coach Walter and Kevin, but you may be called to do something else. As you strive to be like Christ, be ready to lovingly sacrifice something for others.
Tony Dungy, author of the popular Uncommon book series. Discover more at CoachDungy.com. That's CoachDungy.com.
Hi, this is Steve Tiber with 8 Days of Hope. Hurricane Harvey was the second worst disaster ever seen on American soil. 8 Days of Hope responded to that need in Houston, Texas, back in March, where 4,700 volunteers came from all over the world and all 50 states to love and serve people in need. When we left, we realized that there was still much more to do. So many people still were hurting, hundreds of thousands of families looking for somebody, anybody to help them. Here's your chance. 8 Days of Hope 16 will be back in Southeast Houston October 13th through October 20th. It's free. We provide the food and lodging. We're looking for skilled professionals, people who are semi-skilled, and people with no skills or less skilled and want to give back. For more information, you go to our website, 8daysofhope.com. We're expecting about 2,500 volunteers from all over America. to go back to Houston to love and serve those in need. Hope to see you in Houston. 8daysofhope.com for more information. 8daysofhope.com.
Military Matters.
U.S.-backed Syrian fighters have launched what it hopes will be the final push to defeat ISIS on the battlefield in eastern Syria. State Department spokeswoman Heather Nauert announced the start of the operation from Washington.
We are confident that they will successfully liberate the remaining areas ISIS controls along the Syrian-Iraqi border. The campaign to defeat ISIS has liberated nearly 8 million Syrians and Iraqis from ISIS's barbaric rule.
ISIS once controlled an area the size of Ohio across Iraq and Syria. Now, just one city in eastern Syria remains. Defense Secretary Mattis says he believes some ISIS leaders are hiding in the city of Hajin, but would not be more specific.
I wouldn't be surprised if some of ISIS leadership is up there, no, but I don't want to go into more detail than that right now.
The leader of ISIS, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, remains at large, despite a $25 million bounty on his head. For Military Matters at the Pentagon, Lucas Tomlinson, Fox News.
You can watch a live stream of the show on Facebook or YouTube at Stacy on the Right. Now, back to the show on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Yeah, I think it's really bad politics and harmful to Democrats. All right, Democrats need to focus on bread and basket issues to make the economy better, not labeling ourselves socialists or communists or anything else. We got to stay focused on what makes people's lives better, and this is a sideshow.
Well, I mean, I think it'd be interesting if they did do that, but the whole socialism thing is now the baby of the Democrats. If, Republicans have to accept all of this nonsense about alt-right people only being Republicans and the alt-right being strictly a purview of racism and all of that stuff. There's all these strict rules about what you can and can't say about those people who are, they're fringe individuals. They don't represent a huge portion of individuals who have thoughts that are right-leaning. Then why do the Democrats get to say that the socialism isn't really their thing? Or we need to stop acting like socialism is our thing? Or most telling, well, we just need to not talk about that right now. Does that sound a little bit like in the same vein as that whole pass it so you can see what's in it? It's pretty amazing. So it's kind of upsetting, I guess you could say, that we don't have a full understanding in the public anymore about what socialism is. Socialism is where the state owns the means of production. Soft socialism, you can see it in countries like Canada, where you just pay an exorbitant amount in tax and the government controls a whole bunch of your everyday life. And you can't get away from it, really. You have to pay for it, whether you're participating, quote unquote, or not. You have to pay for it. And so the people who are on the receiving end love it. Or the people who are working and paying for everything, not so much. And so you see them moving away from that, trying to, going and living in other countries, moving out into rural areas where they don't so much have to really own the fact that that's what's going on. By the way, you guys, Jim Carrey has a new series on Sundays at 10 p.m. on Showtime, which I don't know about you guys, but we don't have Showtime. Even if we had cable, we wouldn't have Showtime because it's just garbage. And the fact that they're putting a show with Jim Carrey on there, who has become a complete political partisan, so therefore cannot be funny anymore. The fact they're giving him a show, it's like they just keep looking for ways to fail. So in some good news, related good news, you've got Fox News announcing today that they're creating a memorial scholarship program to honor the life of Charles Krauthammer. Now, this is so exciting because he was just a really wonderful person and so intellectually superior, even though he was, he's a never Trumper, but he had some amazing columns. And if you're interested in something to listen to on long car drives or something like that, or on an afternoon where you have some work to do and you just want to have something in the background that's interesting, you can get these CDs of some of his books of essays. And when I say he wrote about wide-ranging topics, it's fascinating I listened to one of them. And I just put it on in the car when we had a longer drive to drop the kids off to and from school. And sometimes they'd be listening to it with me, and other times I'd be in the car by myself listening to it. It was really just these great stories. He wrote essays about people that you would never know about, and kind of talked about what was unique about them. And some of these people, you're like, wow, I can't believe this person wasn't a national figure. But this is back before every little thing you did made you a national figure, including doing nothing. So that Fox News has announced that they're going to partner with the National Merit Scholarship Program to establish the Dr. Charles Krauthammer Memorial Scholarship, available to children of Fox News and Fox Business Network employees, awarding $2,000 per college year per student. It's awarded on a competitive basis, and they will not consider the applicant's financial circumstances, gender, race, ethnic origin, or religious preference. The quote from them is that they are, Charles was a beloved member of the Fox News family, but more importantly, he was an incredible mentor and role model for millions of Americans across the country. We are proud to honor Charles, his legacy, impact, and countless contributions with a new scholarship program enabling the next generation of thought leaders the opportunity and education they need to reach their dreams. Well, that's a pretty small pool that they're going to be pulling from, employees of Fox. I don't know how large that pool is because I have no idea how many people actually work there. But it's definitely not a huge number of people whose children will be under consideration. But, you know, it's a nice gesture that they're doing, that they're going to have that scholarship there. So also, I'd like to ask you to call in and contribute your voice to our listener stories. We have Share-a-thon coming up in October, and it's going to be a great time to show support for Urban Family Talk. It's going to be a fantastic time to engage with the hosts, and it's going to be some fun giveaways. Remember last year we had some fun giveaways from the Stacey on the Right show, and we're going to be doing that again. But right now we need you to call in and leave a voicemail with just your name, the state you're calling from, and then your story. 877-327-5647, 877-327-5647. And the stories will be aired in the weeks prior to Share-a-thon, which is October 16th through 18th, as well as during Share-a-thon. So you'll get to hear your voice on the radio. You can call in and talk about the favorite things from Hamilton Corner, Stacey on the Right, or, the show that comes on right before ours. Anything, really, the show that comes on right after ours. Anything you think would be beneficial. The morning show with Will and Miki, Lonnie Poindexter, anything. Just call in and leave a voicemail about how Urban Family Talk has impacted you and what it means to you. And it's a short voicemail, and then you'll get to hear yourself on the radio, and we will be so grateful to you. In more Jim Carrey news, just to round out the news about him getting his own show, he also, since he's back in the news again, is on the record as saying that he loves socialism. A man as wealthy as he is says he loves socialism. He says Democrats need to stop apologizing for it. Well, first of all, Democrats are not socialists. I mean, anybody who knows anything about political parties knows that if you are a Democrat Party platform is not the same as a Socialist Party platform. I can't believe Democrats are allowing their party to be hijacked by socialists. It should be so insulting for there not to be a delineation between those two belief systems. And we've done it before. I might have to schedule it onto the show sheet that we're going to discuss the Republican Party platform and the Democratic Party platform, just to get it on the record as to what they both say. I guarantee you there'll be some angry mail because, we all have our thing that we want to defend as Christians that isn't biblical. And we all have a ways to go. We're all on the path, getting sanctified together, one step at a time, one Bible verse at a time, one day at a time. But there's some stuff in the Democratic Party platform that does not pass the test when it comes to being biblical. We'll do it. We'll get it on the schedule. So in the last few minutes of the show, if you'd like to call in, it's 866-963-2037, 866-963-2037. So I don't know if you guys saw over at Breitbart, they have this video up of Google's leadership and their crazy, scary, dismayed reactions to the news that Donald Trump had been elected to the presidency. So it's a video that was recorded by Google shortly after the 2016 presidential election, which reveals this atmosphere of utter panic and dismay amongst the tech giant's leadership. Now, you might be thinking, their leadership? Who could that be? All their real actual leaders. It was their first all-hands meeting following the 2016 election. Inside of Google, they call the meetings, the all-hands, the weekly all-hands meeting, the TGIF meeting, because it happens on a Friday. Thank God it's Friday. Sent to Breitbart by an anonymous source, it features co-founders Larry Page, Sergey Brin, Vice Presidents Kent Walker, Eileen Naughton, CFO Ruth Porat, CEO Sundar Pichai, and it can be watched on Breitbart. So you have to watch it in full, according to Breitbart, in order to get the full context and the statements that were made. But these are the people who preside over Google. They're the decision makers, and they're like, if there were to be a sudden change in the direction of what Google stood for, these are the people who would make that choice. They're also the ones with the most to gain from the profitability of Google and its utter stranglehold on the internet. Sergey Brin, who's a co-founder, can be heard comparing Trump supporters to fascists and extremists. Brin argues that, like other extremists, Trump voters were motivated by boredom. He says, in the past, boredom led to fascism and communism. The Google co-founder then asked his company to consider what it can do to ensure, quote, a better quality of governance and decision-making. Vice President for Global Affairs Kent Walker argued that supporters of populist causes like the Trump campaign are motivated by fear, xenophobia, hatred, and a desire for answers that may or may not be there. Really? There are answers. There's always an answer. Later, Walker says that Google should fight to ensure the populist movement, not just in the U.S., but around the world, is merely a blip and a hiccup in a historical arc that bends towards progress. I love these flowery, kind of quote of the century type terms that liberals apply to these ridiculous campaigns that never result in anything good for Americans. So CEO Sundar Pichai states that the company will develop machine learning and AI to combat what another employee described as misinformation that was being shared by low information voters. He says, so it starts out the meeting by saying, well, this isn't probably not the most joyous meeting we've ever had. Most people here are pretty upset and pretty sad. He says, this disappointment that we're experiencing is like the total opposite of our excitement over the legalization of cannabis in California. And so people laughed and they applauded, and then he gets serious again and says he's deeply offended by the election of Trump and that the election itself conflicts with many of Google's values. Trying to explain the motivations of Trump voters, Senior VP for Global Affairs Kent Walker says fear, not just within the United States, but around the world, is fueling concerns, xenophobia, hatred. And then he goes on to describe the Trump phenomenon as a sign of tribalism that is destructive in the long term. Now, never mind the fact that tribalism is exactly what Democrats engage in when they say that black people are only allowed to vote for Democrats. And if you're black and you don't vote for Democrats, that you hate yourself and you hate black people. Never mind that that's rampant tribalism. But anyone who just didn't vote for the Democrat is tribalistic. So striking an optimistic tone, Walker then goes on to assure Google employees that despite the election, history is on our side. The moral arc of history bends towards progress. And then he quotes Prime Minister Matteo Renzi of Italy when he compared the world of the wall with its isolation and defensiveness with the world of the square, the piazza, the marketplace, where people come together in a community and enrich each other's lives. Here's the thing about a community. In a community, everyone is working towards the same goal. The living of the community, the betterment of that community, being a part of that community, sharing the same goals and objectives. The idea that populist Americans can't simply say they see that too many people are coming here, who don't want to be a part of the community of America, don't want to work towards our common goals. They want to tear America down and remake it into the image of the place that they fled from, that somehow that's wrong. It's not wrong. It's utterly correct for us to take the temperature of our country and say, it is bending too far towards the arc of progressivism, and we need to put a stop. In fact, no more arc. Put that line back to being a straight line that's a proving ground for truth and honor and everything that we hold dear in this country, and then start putting things to the test. And anything that fails the test has to be done away with, because we're looking for an honorable, virtuous kind of backbone for this country. And a return to that means everything's better for everyone. Morality is better for us as a country. So then a little later on in the video, where they're, still kind of nursing their wounds and crying, Porat says that he makes a promise. Google will use the great strength and resources and reach we have to continue to advance really important values. Vague statement of almost nothing, stating, we all need a hug. She then instructs the audience of Google employees to hug the person closest to them, which in any other setting would be called sexual harassment and a violation of the Me Too movement. But in this setting, because they're all Google employees and they were told to do so by their boss, perfectly fine. I'll put the link up on the Facebook page if you want to check it out and watch it for yourself. Boy. Anyway, that's the show. Thanks for being with us today. God bless you. Have a fantastic evening. I'll be back with you tomorrow.